Hi, everyone. I wanted to give everyone a moment to filter in before I started reading properly. Hey Logan, hey Sean, hey Green, hey Schlab, hey Fitty, hey Old Dragon, hey AMV Central, hey Magic 8 Ball. Is that Magic Man? I believe that's No, another. Another magic person. Ah, there's Magic Man. Hey John Care, hey Mason. The author has finished Penal Legion. There is not more. There is one more part that is still going to come out that Shoggy is still writing. This is the latest part. Caboose banned certain fan stuff. I am small enough that I'm not super worried about it. This is going to be the new stuff. Um, Before we start, I do just kind of want to go over what's going on right now. I don't normally do live readings like this. Um, a couple of months ago, I took my car in. It's a 2010 Scion XD for inspection. It was the last day to get it inspected because I kind of put it off for a while. And it comes back with a couple of flags. And they're like, hey, we're passing it for inspection for this year, but you have suspension work you need done in like a couple of months. I go, okay, sure, I can do that. Couple of months have passed. I'm planning to head to Indiana to visit Kelly, and I find out, and I take it in, and I say, "Hey, can you do anything about the suspension rust that you mentioned? I would really rather not drive to Indiana on that." And they go, "Oh, no, so we wrote this down as a suspension issue, but it's actually frame rust. You're gonna need to go to an auto body shop for that." So I go, "Okay, there's auto body shops nearby." So I take it to an auto body shop. And I show them. And the guy from the auto body shop comes outside and gets down onto the ground and reaches underneath and sticks his hands into these rusted out holes in the frame, comes back up, looks at me, and goes, "I cannot do anything about this. This part is not sold, and this is a contour part. I cannot fabricate this." And I ask if there's anyone who can fix this, and he says, "Maybe take it to a metal fabrication shop." So it turns out I have a friend who does automobile metal fabrication. And I ask him, and he says to show him the pictures. And I show him these two pictures, and he goes pale. And I am told that I should not be driving this car. That this car is a fucking death trap. And that I need to get out of it as soon as I can. These pictures that I have here are from inspection. These are almost 2 months old. So it's definitely gotten worse since then. Thank you for the 10 Australian masked gaming. The one thing I'm going to request is that donations not be through super chat. Super chat donations take a while to come through. I don't get those until next month, and I lose most of it to YouTube. There is a Streamlabs donation link and a GoFundMe link. They should both be in the description, and the GoFundMe link is pinned. Okay. But yeah, anyway, there are a few cars that I'm looking at. I'm a little sad. There was this moment of serendipity. I almost had my hands on a Subaru Legacy station wagon 2003. Um, which is one of the cars I grew up in. So I have a lot of nostalgia for that car, even if it's not really. And they were selling it for $2,500 because it had a dinged door and a beat up hood. And neither of that is super, you know. But either way, there's a few cars I'm looking at. I have a rough budget of like what the minimum I need to get a car that I think will get me through at least a couple of years. Um, and I still have $7,000 worth of loan on my Scion, which I have not even had for a year yet. So I'm a little bit pissed off about that. Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to take a drink of water, and I am going to begin. Deep inside the sprawling fortress city, referred to by all but the most pedantic inquisitors inhabiting it as Sector Headquarters, no longer acting Inquisitor Greg Sargent straightened his orange jumpsuit as the holding room door he'd spent the better part of 7 hours staring at finally creaked open. The two inquisitorial stormtroopers flanking the door, who'd been stuck standing reflexively at attention for the entire time, breathed a little sigh of relief and hastily led the way into the courtroom on the far side. The 4 other stormtroopers in the room relaxed, as well as the impromptu poker tournament that had been occupying the rest of the squad ended without further bloodshed, and Amy, as winner, put Doc and Tink in charge of collecting Twitch, while the two of them extracted the demolitions trooper from the pile of furniture he'd squirreled himself away in. Nubby collected the cards he'd borrowed and scooted the chair he'd subsequently been cuffed to over to the borrowee, who grudgingly uncuffed him. The stormtrooper blinked in confusion as the little trooper sidled off after his companions without returning the cards. Or the cuffs, for that matter. He shared a pained look with the other stormtroopers as they followed the guardsmen into the courtroom. By unanimous, silent agreement, the unholy mess that had once been the court's tastefully decorated holding room was left for the janitorial staff to discover for themselves. As the 6 guardsmen quite literally trooped into the courtroom, the robe and wig-wearing inquisitor sitting at its head took them in with the boredly hopeful expression of someone who was almost done for the day. That expression soured as a one... That expression soured as one of the court's side doors opened to admit a cart bearing a teetering, meter-high pile of binders, folders, loose papers, data slates, and precariously balanced scrolls. With an annoyed glare at the scribe hidden somewhere behind the cart, the inquisitorial judge plucked the topmost binder off the pile and cleared his throat. Greg Sargent, you and your men stand accused of parking in a restricted area? The Inquisitor paused and flipped to the next page. Failing to vacate in a timely manner? He flipped farther.
loading or unloading a vehicle in a no-loading zone. Really? There was a mutter of, "It weren't posted or nothing," from the end of the line of guardsmen, and one of the stormtroopers made a choking sound. The Inquisitor shot a glare at both of them as he snapped the binder shut, pulled the next one off the pile, and cleared his throat again. "Greg Sergeant, you and your men, you stand accused of attempting to bribe a traffic..." "Excuse me for a second." The Inquisitor leaned over the side of his desk to glare at the cartload of files and the figure behind them until he was finally rewarded with a slightly quavery reply. "What? Do you need help with the long words or something?" Ignoring the increasing snickering and entirely missing the look of confused recognition on three of the guardsmen's faces, the Inquisitor leaned further and gritted his teeth. "Why are they here?" "They're just more of Quercus's idiots, obviously." Sarge's eyes widened slightly. Twitch let out a faint giggle, and Doc abruptly started blushing as a familiar gray-haired woman in Adept's robes shuffled out and extracted a leather folio from the middle of the pile. "Did you think I'd schedule a real case this late in the day?" The Inquisitor's expression brightened as he opened the folio. "I see." He looked back up to the Adept. "So all this is just..." He gestured at the teetering pile of documents. The Adept shrugged. "Like I said, idiots." Quite." The Inquisitor sat up, straightened his wig, and cleared his throat for a third time. "Greg Sergeant, as servants of a rogue Inquisitor, you and your men are hereby sentenced to..." "Wait!" interrupted Tink. "You can't just sentence us. What about our trial?" Nubby stepped forward as well. "Hey, you didn't even ask us if we was guilty or not." The Inquisitor raised an eyebrow. "Are you saying you're not part of Inquisitor Quercus's criminally oversized retinue?" "Yes." Tink paused. I mean, no, but we definitely didn't do any of that other stuff." "And if we did, we had orders," added Nubby, completely ignoring the boot repeatedly slamming into one of his augmetic shins. The Inquisitor raised his other eyebrow. "Ah, I see. You're saying your Inquisitor ordered you to..." He looked down at one of the binders. "Assault, abduct, and otherwise obstruct a traffic officer in the performance of their duties?" "Well, he might have..." Tink trailed off as he finally registered the glares of his comrades. "And we definitely had orders for the stuff with the zone..." "Ow!" Nubby doubled over as Sarge stepped forward. "Yes, sir." Sarge cleared his throat. "Those, traffic offenses were committed in the performance of our duties. All of them." The Inquisitor turned his gaze to the non-com, who stared not quite back with the blankly fixed expression employed by soldiers receiving discipline since time immemorial. After several seconds, the man shook his head, shot an annoyed glance at the massive pile of files and the Adept behind them, and sighed. "Noted. Greg Sergeant, as servants of a rogue Inquisitor, you and your men are hereby sentenced to stasis imprisonment until such a time as the matter of your Inquisitor's loyalty has..." Once again, the Inquisitor was interrupted, this time by a cough from the Adept, and a single envelope being pushed up onto his desk. He glared at the elderly woman, who grinned back innocently, until he finally sighed and extracted the envelope's contents. After a few seconds of reading, he paused. His eyes skipped down to the signature at the bottom of the letter, and then up to scan the lines of Guardsmen, until they settled on the white-haired guardswoman in the center. Oh, dear. This is a regrettable situation, isn't it? He glanced to side. One I certainly could have been informed of before the trial started. The adept just rolled her eyes and pointed a bony finger at the letter. The Inquisitor looked back down and continued reading until his expression suddenly cleared. That's certainly an unexpected suggestion. He tapped his fingers on the letter for a few seconds, then looked down to the adept again. Not a bad one, though. Surprisingly reasonable, all things considered. The adept prodded the massive pile of documents between them. It would save on the paperwork. The Inquisitor's lips twitched ever so slightly. And it certainly never hurts to stay on good terms with the Sector Militarum. Yes. He sat up, straightening his wig, and returned his gaze to the assembled guardsmen. Greg Sargent, this court has decided that in recognition of you and your men's years of faithful militarum service, and your status as associates of the Lady General von Humperdinck, the charges against you will be deferred indefinitely, and you will be given a chance to redeem yourselves of any crimes you may have committed through service in the penal legions. Dismissed. The shocked silence that followed the gavel strike was broken by a single rising growl. That scheming, conniving, two-faced, lying guardsmen and stormtroopers alike scrambled back. Rat fucking bastard told my mother? The All-Guardsman Party and the Inquisitorial Penal Legion.
And that is where I pause for a little bit of water and a moment to check on the fundraiser. Oh, geez. I am up to $415 raised for the car. I'm a tenth of the way there. Let me catch up on chat a little bit. Oh, I know exactly why it's echoing. I'm sorry. I will fix that. I am broadcasting both my microphone and my desktop audio. I have my microphone's audio playing back to me through Audacity. I've fixed that now. I just turned off desktop audio. I'm very sorry about the echo. I am recording this in Audacity, so that will be fixed when it's, properly released. Someone's shouting downstairs. Not entirely sure. And I did not notice... Oh, thank you for the $10, Magic Man and Jzig. Ah. '98 Nissan Sentra that was a death trap. No airbags. Oh, God. Oh, if you want to hear a fun one, I've been looking at cars. I stopped today to check out a Jeep that's been on the side of the road. Normally, I would, if it looked fairly newish, I would have gone, no, fuck no, I don't want a new Jeep. If someone's getting rid of a Jeep that's less than a few years old, it's got issues. It's a Jeep. What made me stop was the square headlights, which means one thing when you see a Jeep. It means that that is a YJ, meaning it is somewhere between 1985 and 1987 and 1995, which is they were not popular at the time because they replaced the CJ, but honestly, they're pretty nice Jeeps. Not a good idea for me, since it gets 16 miles to the gallon combined. But also I want a Jeep. And I figure, old Jeep might be fairly cheap. Jeep's rust, probably Swiss up. I'm looking at it, there's surface rust all over, which you expect with a Jeep. And there's a sign taped to the window. 1990 Jeep YJ. Rebuilt rear. What was it? Rebuilt transfer case. Rebuilt rear. Phone number to call. No mileage listed anywhere. Do you know how much this person wanted for this goddamn Jeep? For this goddamn 1990 Jeep YJ? Hey, if you don't have money to donate, that is fine. You're really close, Graham. You wanted $13,500 for it. I love Jeeps. I would love to get an old fucking Jeep. I'm not paying $13,000 for a 32-year-old Jeep that gets 16 miles to the gallon. Part of me wants to call up, laugh into the phone, and then go, cut $10,000 off of that and I'll take it. You can get a 2010 Prius for like $4,000 these days. It might not be in good condition, but I've seen them listed. Gasoline. Four-cylinder engine. Dude's delusional if you think. Yeah. No, it's a 1990 Jeep. Of course it gets 16 miles to the gallon. It's not even like the fancy rare bodies that they show, the fucking Jeep Renegade, which is kind of hard to get and was like a special edition. It's not a Sahara. It doesn't have that badging all over it. It just says Wrangler on it. And it doesn't even have a hard top. It's a soft top. Yup. 1990. 32 years old. 8 years older than me. But yeah. Not getting that. I checked KBB. The oldest blue book goes back as 92, but they say a good condition Jeep from 92 will go between 4,500 and 6,900. Nowhere in there does a Jeep go for 13,000. Honestly, one of the things I'm looking at is a new Saturn, because I used to drive a Saturn. I used to drive a Saturn SL1 2000. That thing got 35 miles to the gallon. Was this such a good car? The reason I finally had to get rid of it was because a fucking tree branch smashed the back windshield in the middle of a storm, and the inside was severely water damaged. I still drove it for another year or so after that, but the third brake light was gone, and the 2000 had a kind of weird one that's harder to find a replacement for, because most salvage Saturns have the third brake light in a different spot. and the headliner started peeling and the roof was leaking. I loved that car. But I'm looking at another Saturn, a 97 Saturn, a what was it? A Nissan Altima that's stick shift. I'm gonna learn to drive stick shift tomorrow, and a Ford Focus 06. But I have some cars that I'm looking at that are all in the roughly $2,000 to $4,000 range. Oh, I hit $500. Thank you. I wish I could like update. So Streamlabs won't let me have the goal update with the fucking GoFundMe. So that GoFundMe will have the accurate total plus whatever I get from the stream tonight. I'm gonna finish this cup of tea and then I'm gonna start again. Why do you hate Saturns, Graham? I loved my Saturn. They're a parts nightmare? Are they? Never seemed like an issue. It would. Oh, I have some Moroccan mint tea. Green tea. It's lovely. And once I finish with All Guardsmen Party tonight, I may start playing another game if I still need to keep going. Saturns are not necessarily rebadged opals. Saturns post 2000, no, Saturns post 2001 are rebadged opals. The L series and the View, which my dad used to have a View. Loved that car. It got crushed by a tree. The S series, there are so many of them driving in this area. There are so many S series cars still driving in this area that you can fucking pull parts out of a junkyard. What is it with me and trees? I live in the middle of the woods. The second there's a storm, trees and branches start falling. And hey, the View wasn't my car. The View was my dad's car. My dad's car saved my car and my mother's car from getting wrecked. It fell across the engine block of his, and it was suspended a couple of inches above our cars. There's still a ding in my mom's hood. Hey, Blue Cloak. And like, to be fair, I never have issues with engines. The engines in the cars I get always seem to run for fucking ever. It's always frame issues. And it's always suspension related. It is not a hospital fundraiser. It is a car fundraiser. My car is a fucking disaster right now. Holy crap, big stream. Hey, Kelly. You're gay. Okay, I'm going to continue. Yeah. For whatever reason, Audacity decided to start re-recording from... Never mind. So no shit, there we were, being hauled off to die in the penal legions, just like our old commissar always said would happen. Honestly, it shouldn't have come as a surprise, especially given Oak's little comment about arranging for us to get a shorter sentence. After all, the average life expectancy of a penal legionnaire is probably somewhere between 1 and 0 battles. Needless to say, we weren't exactly thrilled with our oh-so-clever inquisitor. None of us could quite reach Amy's level of simmering rage. Okay. Missed a word there. Though none of us could quite reach Amy's level of simmering rage, it had taken 3 stormtroopers with shock batons to end our markswoman's little fit. She only started to calm down once she got a chance to read the letter that the adept handed her as she was dragged out. We honestly thought the part where her mom said she understood it was all inquisitorial political bullshit, wasn't her fault, and would always love her were all very touching. Less so the bit about how she wouldn't have to worry about disgracing the Von Humperdinck name because they'd already arranged to have her posthumously disinherited and struck from all family records if she died before the charges were cleared. Amy took some comfort in it at least, said it was proof that her mother actually wrote the letter herself. Sarge got an envelope from the adept as well, but it turned out to just be a wad of official paperwork and transfer orders. Given the way the sarcastic old bat had choreographed the whole farce, we'd sort of expected something more. Secret orders-y? Maybe a little note explaining just where this top-secret evidence storage facility Oak wanted us to infiltrate was, and how in the Emperor's name we were supposed to accomplish this while stuck in a bloody penal legion. The only even remotely relevant thing Doc and Tink found in there was a bit saying we had 10 days to claim our property out of evidence before it was all incinerated. We somehow doubted that we'd be given a day off from penal legioning to do so. We didn't have too much time to dig through the Adept's packet for more clues, or to bitch about how stupid the whole situation was for that matter. We'd expected to be shipped across the planet or system to some Munitorum depot, but, as it turned out, the HQ had their very own penal legion stationed on site, presumably to save on gas or something. After a short drive, the stormtroopers hauled us out, and we got our first look at our new home. Camp Redemption, as the big sign over the gate declared it, or the dump, if you went by the spray paint under. Spray paint. Or the dump if you went by the spray paint under it. Honestly, it didn't really look that bad. If you ignored the fact that all the defenses were pointed inwards, it could have passed for pretty much any other guard camp we'd seen. Some prefab buildings, some drill yards full of sweating grunts, same ankle-deep mud. Hell, it even had the same smell, that wonderful combination of body odor, pit latrines, state rations. I can't read. Stale rations and spilled promethium. Sarge took a deep, nostalgic breath, as did Twitch and Nubby. Amy just made gagging sounds. Now, the camp's occupants, on the other hand, we'd apparently arrived right at some sort of muster, but we didn't pay the 2,000 or so shaved and bomb-collared troopers much mind. No, the first thing our trained guardsman senses noticed was the sheer number of commissars strutting about. Your typical regiment, inasmuch as there is such a thing in the Guard, tends to sport around one commissar per company, or even less if you were with one of them fancy-pants nobby regiments. We spotted what had to be at least one pointy-hatted bastard per platoon. And that wasn't all. Instead of the Arbite shock squads we expected to be keeping discipline in the ranks, the lanes between each platoon were patrolled by squads wearing the blue-trimmed coats and eagerly homicidal expressions of baby commissars. Twitch informed the rest of us that we were all going to die. For once, nobody argued with him. Our grim speculation was interrupted by the arrival of one of those cadet commissar squads, led by a particularly unpleasant-looking real one carrying a whip. The commissar, a weasel-faced bastard somewhere between 60 and 600, depending on how much juvenant they'd pumped into him, angrily informed the stormtroopers that they were late. After a bit of confusion about the transfer orders and why in the Emperor's name they'd given them to us, he ordered his minions to just chain us all together and get us an information. He'd process us and send us back the uniforms later. The Legion had almost finished forming up in a platoon-wise grid by this point. We were led to an empty spot at the rear corner, where Sarge was instructed to stand out as far as the ankle chain would allow, and the rest of us lined up behind him. Satisfied that we were capable of standing at parade rest without any motivational whipping, the old commissar told us not to move. I'll take a moment to take a look at stuff. A Toyota RAV4 since woods. I live in the middle of the woods, but on a main road. Welcome to Pennsylvania. Oh, Jesus fucking Christ, I'm at 710. Okay. This... Okay. Thank you, everyone. I'm gonna keep going. The old commissar told us not to move or say anything, and stalked off to stand at the head of our column. The reason for the parade became clear when a scribe with a data slate and an especially fancy commissar, who we assumed was the base commander, arrived and announced that the Inquisition was looking for volunteers. To our surprise, they actually got them, at least at first. At the back of our line, Twitch claimed that this was a clear sign that they were drugging the rations. Doc, who was in the spot ahead of him, actually took him seriously enough to look around and check for signs in the other legionnaires. We got reminded of the no moving rule by the old commissar and his whip. We watched as 3 whole platoons of chumps stepped forward, were loaded up into transports, followed by 2 more that were more traditionally volunteered by the commissars. And then the scribe announced that the rest of what his inquisitor needed were specialists, starting with the demolitions expert. The old commissar checked the papers we'd given him and stepped forward. Fortunately for us, the specialist positions must have had slightly higher requirements than literally the first idiot you find, because the scribe and commander came down into the ranks to inspect the candidates. They did, of course, start with our end of the regiment, but we didn't have to do anything drastic to get Twitch off the hook. All it took was one look at this strung-out demo trooper, his own proud declaration that he didn't just know explosives, he slept with them, and a single orc-related accusation in the commander's direction for them to decide to move on to the next candidate. Once the headhunting party passed us, we began to notice whispering and occasional movements in the legionnaires around us. None of us were close enough to the other platoons to really catch what was going on, aside from it obviously being related to avoiding volunteering. Since that old commissar was far too close and attentive for us to consider shifting closer, we didn't pay much of it any mind until a scuffle in the back ranks of our column drew the commissar's attention away, and someone behind Twitch muttered, "Punch Greg. Next pass." The demolition trooper turned to stare in confusion at the leader of the platoon behind him, a large, muscle-bound, dark-skinned man who... and asked who Greg was. This was apparently not the correct response. The dark-skinned platoon sergeant, who Twitch was fairly certain hadn't been there earlier, rolled his eyes and repeated himself twice, then made a frustrated noise and finally clarified to punch Greg Sargent, your interrogator, right now. Twitch gave him a fish-eyed look and gestured at the chains connecting his ankles to Doc's and the... Ugh. Connecting his ankles to Doc's and the distance to Sarge out in front of the line, eliciting more eye-rolling until finally realizing what was going on and passing the message on to Doc. Then to Amy, Tink, and finally Nubby. The short trooper glanced between Sarge's back and the returning commissar, and then told Tink to ask, what for? The message was passed back down the line to the platoon sergeant, who went bug-eyed, but didn't manage to get an actual reply out before the scribe, just a few platoons away, announced that the last man he needed was someone with a bit of command authority. As the scribe asked the commander... As the scribe asked if the commander had anyone properly sergeanty, Twitch abruptly got the point and passed the message to just punch Sarge, damn it! Back up the line, where it once again stalled at Nubby and Tink, who both took one look at the watching commissar and his whip, and then nominated each other to do the actual punching. The ensuing argument over whether Nubby or Tink would make the less suitable Sarge assaulter was interrupted by a string of curses and Amy charging past them at Sarge's back. One spot further back in line, Doc looked down at the chain connecting his ankles to Amy's just in time to see his feet fly out from under him. Nubby and Tink watched as the markswoman slammed face first into the mud next to them, blinked, and then immediately resumed their argument, paying absolutely no attention to the approaching commissar. Fortunately for the pair, before the actual whipping could start, attention was taken off of them by the sudden arrival of the dark-skinned legionnaire whose flying tackle hit Sarge hard enough to pull both the arguing troopers down as well. Twitch, as the only guardsman left standing, watched with a certain amount of satisfaction as Sarge pulled the legionnaire off him and did his level best to kill the man until the fight was finally broken up by several cadets armed with shock batons. In the silence that followed the exciting round of non-com mud wrestling, the clerk asked if the commander if he'd been drugging the rations again. The commander explained to the confused clerk that they'd discontinued that program for cost reasons, and starting fights was a common tactic to avoid getting chosen. The dark-skinned legionnaire had a history of it, especially when it involved his subordinates getting chosen. The clerk digested this, and then said that sort of behavior sounded remarkably leader-like. The commander grinned and agreed. Down in the mud, the legionnaire started swearing, but quickly shut his mouth as the commander leaned down and asked if he was refusing to volunteer for inquisitorial service. The man shot a final, exasperated look at us as he was hauled off with the rest of the inquisitorial volunteers, and the commander and clerk finally left with the whole parade in tow. Any relief on our part evaporated as the old commissar stalked forward again and had his cadets haul us out of the mud. Instead of the expected whipping, though, the man gave us a thoughtful look, asked why the legionnaire would have bothered with us. When he didn't get an answer, the commissar started flipping through our papers, briefly pausing at Sarge's name and rank to look up and ask, "Really?" Until his expression abruptly lit up with recognition. The commissar looked Amy up and down, and, in the most self-satisfied voice we'd heard outside an inquisitorial briefing, announced that a penal legion was no place for a lady like her,
but fortunately, the commissariat would be happy to do the Von Humperdings a little favor. Amy's expression conveyed exactly what she thought of this favor and where he could shove it. But she still put it into words, just to make sure. Unfortunately for the markswoman, it didn't turn out that she had much of a say in the matter, and Cadet Commissar von Humperdinck was marched off at gunpoint to get a shower and a fancy new hat, while a tech priest and a pair of servo skulls were brought over to fit the rest of us for some less fancy explosive collars. All in all, she probably got the worst deal. One bomb collaring and servo skull shave job later, the part where they'd tattoo our foreheads would apparently wait until deployment. We were standing around wondering just what the hell had happened, and if we should have done, well, anything about it? Our discussion on the subject was interrupted by someone behind us asking the exact same question. We turned around to find a group of 4 legionnaires staring at us. Sarge began to say something, and then paused, and stared back for a few confused seconds, trying to place why the 4 bald guardsmen we were looking at seemed so familiar, until Twitch and one of the legionnaires both pointed at each other and shouted, "It's you!" And the rest of us, sans Tink, abruptly recognized all 4 of them as former trainees from our brief stint as inquisitorial drill sergeants. It was hard for us to say who was more surprised. We all just stared at each other for a few seconds, and then the leader of the group, one of the ex-PDF troopers, laughed, saluted Sarge, and said he never dreamed Oak would send us to get them out, and we'd better talk to the interrogator right away. At least, as soon as they found him. He'd snuck off during the muster to do something at the other end. He'd snuck off during muster to do something or other at our end of the parade grounds. According to them, he looked sort of like Sarge, but bigger, grumpier, and blacker. Had we seen him by any chance? The 4 trainees accepted the bad news about their interrogator like true guardsmen. This is to say, with a mixture of swearing, the exchange of a few packs of smokes and ration bars, and a smug "I told you so" from the former scum who'd apparently just won the running death pool. Our pride in them was only tempered by the fact that the agent Oak had apparently sent to help us had just been hauled off to join some sort of inquisitorial suicide squad. They took the news that we had no idea what they meant about getting them out, and were there for something completely different with a similar amount of cynicism. The ex-scribe said it explained a lot, and suggested we get back to their barracks to finish the conversation. Doc asked if that was really wise, given how gossipy barracks life can be, but the trainees assured him it was okay. They had their very own building separate from the rest of the platoon, just them and their commissar, who was, quote, one of the good ones. Nubby and Twitch both pointed out that the only good commissar was a dead one. The trainees agreed and said we'd understand when we met him. What they meant by that became clear when we entered the lovingly sandbagged and razor-wired prefab and encountered a rotund, red-coated man firmly ensconced in a filthy recliner. Judging by the snoring, the man probably wasn't dead, but judging by the thick carpet of liquor bottles on his side of the barracks, he was definitely working on it. The scribe introduced him as Commissar Kelly, gave him a firm poke in the belly, and when he didn't respond, extracted a data slate from the recesses of the chair and asked whether Sarge wanted to be put down as the new platoon lead, or if one of them should do it. Nubby, Twitch, and the rest of us admitted they were right about their commissar. Okay. Half an hour in.
to recording. I'm getting a lot of pings. Oh, it's all from earlier when there was the echo on stream. There should no longer be an echo on stream. Okay. Let me just check where we are. 7:30 plus the 20 from that. Jeez, I'm at 7:40. Okay. Yep. It's all Guardsmen Party, and this, I'm going to leave this stream up until I edit the audio that I am recording for a much cleaner experience. I may wind up re-recording sections of it because I'm sure that you have heard the cars. And yes, I am a fellow Pennsylvanian. I've missed All Guardsmen Party. I've missed All Guardsmen Party so much. I wish I had more energy to regularly record. This is the new Park Coronosa. And just a reminder, there's no pressure to donate. Just if you can, it is greatly appreciated. Honestly, if everyone who was subscribed donated a single dollar to me, I could buy a brand new car. That said, I don't think not everyone who's subscribed isn't even watching this. But, you know, you only donate if you are in a place to financially donate, and every dollar helps. I'm going to continue. Once we'd been officially inducted into the platoon, with Sarge as lead, issued proper guard fatigues and some disappointingly power-packless lasguns out of a stash behind the commissar's chair, the trainees brought us up to speed. As it turned out, the four of them, one PDF trooper, scribe, cleric, and no longer ex-con, hadn't been scooped up as part of the whole Oak thing. They'd actually been enjoying inquisitorial hospitality since before everything hit the fan. Their team had done all right on their first few missions after graduation, as had the other trainees as far as they knew. But a few months back, they'd run into trouble. The PDF trooper explained that it had all been because of our training, you see. While our advice about just shooting anyone stupid enough to mess with the blatantly evil eldritch artifacts had served them well, we probably hadn't meant that rule to include interrogators. At least, not when there were witnesses around. The good news was that thanks to that decision, they'd mostly survived that encounter, and the Inquisition investigators had actually agreed with their decision. The bad news was that grunts shooting their superior officers is generally frowned upon, regardless of what organization you're in, hence the Penal Legion. They'd been in here for the better part of 2 months, and since regiments were shipped out every 2 or 3 months, that actually made them some of the camp's most senior inmates. They'd arrived at the arrangement with their pet commissar and had been trying to figure out if there was a way to get themselves forgotten when the regiment shipped out. And then the interrogator had turned up and started talking about how Oak wanted to help them escape. Not being chumps, they hadn't believed a word of it and told them as much, until the man finally admitted he needed their help for something and would arrange for one of Oak's allies to extract them all together afterwards. Our former trainees had been a bit dubious, but the interrogator had obviously been some sort of legitimate, because right after he'd arrived, the Penal Legion had started being assigned work details around the nearby sections of HQ. Somehow, he'd gotten their squad permanently assigned to groundskeeping duty at a complex just down the road, and had been devouring their reports of the place's layout and exterior security these last few weeks. Of course, being an interrogator, the man had been tight-lipped about why they were doing all this scouting, but given that the largest building in the complex had mundane evidence storage written on the front, it didn't take a genius to figure out he was planning some sort of heist. Their theory had been reinforced by the contents of the interrogator's secret stash under the barracks flakboards, where they'd discovered and rifled through about 10 minutes after the man had set it up, and happily cracked open to show us. Aside from the booby traps, which they declared to be decidedly substandard compared to what Twitch had tested them on, the stash contained an inquisitorial stormtrooper uniform, complete with a badge identifying the interrogator as an inquisitorial HQ guard, as well as some sort of weird data slate with a badge slot, and several stacks of notes and blueprints focused on and under the evidence building. The final item, tucked in the very bottom of the stash, was a 3-ring binder titled The Loyal Servant of Mars Mark 121 HS Etheric Variable Discipline Collar, Sacred Diagrams and Maintenance Hymnal. Tink immediately seized the technical binder, and after a few seconds of perusing, demanded a mirror and a Type 5 combi tool or the closest thing the trainees had. The ex-con raised an eyebrow at him, and then shrugged, fished a large, slightly bent screwdriver, a cracked shaving mirror, and a few homemade metal shims out from under the commissar's filthy chair, and told him to go nuts. After a few seconds of dismayed staring at the proffered tools, Tink huffed, snatched them up, and went to work. The rest of us watched as the techie began scraping the blunt screwdriver around the seams of his collar in search of something or other, and alternated between cursing at his tools, as well as whichever cogboy had written the manual, and flipping between the 3 different technical diagrams. After nearly a minute of this, the former cleric suggested he worry about the collar later. The interrogator had been trying for days and hadn't even managed to get his collar's cover off. Tink assured him that it was because the man was a technological idiot who didn't know a diode from a donut, whereas he could read a circuit diagram with both eyes closed and had spent the last year studying technology so advanced it made the Mechanicus's simple little toys look like simple little toys. The trainee nodded and agreed, and suggested that it might also have something to do with the fact that the manual was for a completely different model of collar than the ones we were all actually wearing. One without the special anti-tamper feature. Or so he'd heard. Tink paused, and then very slowly pulled his tools away from his neck and suggested that it might be better if he started with someone else's collar first. Everyone in the room took a step backwards, except for Twitch, who suggested that maybe this sort of thing should be left to the demolitions expert instead, and then grabbed the screwdriver and instructed Tink to hold still. Tink decided he'd rather not do this, and darted around behind the comatose commissar with Twitch close on his heels. While Tink and Twitch bickered, the rest of us perused the interrogator's notes on the evidence building, but it was all disappointingly rough. There were several different possible entry points marked on the diagram, each with little notations about pros and cons, as well as several instances of Ask Team's technical demolitions expert about X. Given that said experts were busy playing Ring Around the Commissar while a harried trainee tried to keep them from waking the snoring man up, we decided those could wait for later. The one thing about the notes that really jumped out to us was a complete lack of any sort of objective marker. Everything was either about getting in or getting out, but not a word on where to go afterwards. Noticing our confusion, the ex-scribe pointed at several strings of numbers and letters jotted along the side of one of the pages. He said he was pretty sure the shorter one at the top was the storage unit ID code for Oak's case, and the rest were the IDs for the individual pieces of evidence he wanted us to steal before his trial. The real question, according to the former PDF trooper, was just what the hell piece of evidence in Oak's case locker was so bloody damning that having it spontaneously disappear would actually improve things. Sarge, torn between relief that at least some fragment of operational security had been maintained, and feeling like a hypocritical ass, informed the trainees that they really didn't need to know. Sarge's non-answer was accepted by the trainees with only a moderate amount of grumbling about him having become one of them, and over the course of the evening, a plan was formed. Taking another short break. Jesus fucking Christ, someone donated $200. What? Two people. Okay. 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 Wow. Yeah, I am seeing a lot of super chats. Super chats are really nice. But I don't see any of the money from them until the end of next month, and YouTube takes about 40% of the super chat earnings. I get a lot more of the money if you donate through the tip jar link, which goes through PayPal, or the GoFundMe fundraiser that I have linked. Both the GoFundMe is pinned. Both of them should be in the stream's description. It's a lot better for me than super chats. Thank you, though. I'm not going to say no to money, even if it's going to be a little delayed. Yeah, no, I have a huge bottle of water here. It's like a 2-liter bottle of water. I'm actually starting to think everything's gonna be okay. That's a weird feeling, because nothing is ever okay. Oh no. Somebody in my local game store's memes channel has posted an EDH color stereotypes meme. What are mine? Let's see. Mono white is you activated my trap card creates a token. And what is red white? While you were ramping, I studied the blade. Fuck you. Absolutely accurate. Fuck you. Blue black is I always play a spellcasting rogue. The mono white one is actually not true for my mono white deck. I don't have enough token creation in it. Kelly, I've met your character types. Is Trixia not a spellcasting rogue when we really get down to it? Blue white? Blue white is my win condition is eventually. Green white is where's green white? There it is. Constantly runs out of space on their playmat. Fuck. Red and blue. My favorite Magic the Gathering archetype is Solitaire. Black white is creature be dying, life total be rising. These are so fucking accurate, and I hate it. MLP Trixie. So Kelly's character in our current Dark Heresy game is Trixia, the Psyker from a demon world. Except only one other person in our party is aware she's from a demon world. Yeah, mono blue gets a thrill from saying in response. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, no one. Kane is Trixia's favorite person in the world. It goes all the way up to all 4 colors. I will say all 4 colors is janky or OP, no middle ground. Grixis, jeez. I don't even remember what fucking some of the color names are. Grixis is blue, black, red. Blue, black, red. Where is it? Here it is. A villain TM. Mono green bear queen. Yes. Red, white, and blue. Creatures equals 1. Cards drawn this turn equals 7. Blue, black, red. Oh wait, no, that's Grixis. Blah. These are so fucking accurate. I love these. Oh, black red is the real treasure was the damage we dealt along the way. Okay, I'm going to continue. I've rested my voice a little bit. Oh, colorless? Why won't anyone play with me? What's wrong with Eldrazi artifacts? Okay, I'm gonna pour some more tea and I'm gonna get started again. So I do play. Actually, I think if I finish all Guardsmen party and still keep going. Hey Kelly, Kelly, no one. Would the two of you like to do a spell table stream later if I finish all Guardsmen parties at a semi reasonable hour? Okay, I'm gonna continue. If I get to the point where I'm like, I have no more energy to keep this going, I may actually just do a second live read. I'm actually really enjoying doing this live read like this. I would be okay with making this a semi-regular thing. Not a super regular thing, but like, I could do once a month big live readings and then edit the proper audio. It's actually really fun. And I really like reading stuff. Okay. Keeps jumping back. Well, it wasn't exactly a plan per se. More of a chore list, for starters. Sarge wanted to have a look at this evidence building himself. So the trainees did some more fiddling on the napping commissar's data slate to get him included on the groundskeeping detail. While Sarge was out scouting, the rest of us were to put our heads together on the whole collar problem. After a lot of inane argument, the technical side was assigned to Tink and Twitch, and the pair were given firm instructions to start by actually reading the outdated manual instead of just looking at the pictures. They were going to meet some... They were going to need some proper tools, of course, which was Nubby's job, along with the ex-con, who said he already knew some guys. Finally, since nobody present was willing to let Tink or Twitch fiddle with their collars, Doc was asked to go provide a corpse or seven. The medic had objected, loudly asking why we expected him to just have a bunch of dead bodies lying around. Tink pointed out that A, he was an Imperial Guard medic, and B, this was a penal legion. The only real problem would be finding ones that still had their heads. Duck grumpily ceded the point and promised to go volunteer for the Legion's medical corps. The final chore involved the numbers from the notes, or, to be more precise, the very similar ones Sarge vaguely remembered seeing on that little "please collect your stuff" slip mixed in with our transfer orders, the ones that the old commissar had walked off with. According to the trainees, they'd have been filed away in the commissariat command post, and none of us stood the slightest chance of getting anywhere near them. Luckily for us, we already had someone on the inside. All we had to do was figure out how to make contact without raising any commissarial eyebrows. The trainees asked if we meant that sister who'd come in with us, and were advised not to call Amy that to her face if they valued their teeth. The next morning, we got our first taste of life in an inquisitorial penal legion. The day started off at 6 with a public execution, followed by a fiery sermon from the Legion's head priest, some sort of redemption precantor, we guessed based off of his stuff about cleansing sin through glorious death. After the sermon, there was a roll call, in which a slightly disgruntled cadet stood in for the commissar we'd been left snoozing. Okay, I think there may be a typo here that I need to navigate through. There's also a lot of cars that I need to let past. Caboose. Caboose, did you say red, white, dwarf deck? Did somebody say red, white, dwarf deck? I play red, white, dwarf equipment. Jesus Christ, we passed 1,000. When did they end up in a penal legion? At the start of this. It is at the start of this part. red white dwarves are the best tribal. After the sermon, there was a roll call, in which a slightly disgruntled cadet stood in for the commissar we'd left snoozing in his slightly damp chair. And we moved on to some good old guard issue PT and dummy weapon drills. And finally, another public execution before lunch. Honestly, it was all sort of homey, just like being back in one of the training regiments, if a rather disciplinarian one. Okay, maybe disciplinarian is putting it a bit lightly. By lunch, the death count was up to 7, and we were pretty sure the commissars had some sort of daily competition going on to see who could get the most whippings in. Aside from the big public executions, which the trainees said weren't actually a pre-meal tradition, that morning was just busier than usual for some reason. The leading cause of death appeared to be summary execution by the hands of the cadets for minor, possibly imaginary infractions. This behavior didn't really surprise us. Anyone who's met a baby commissar could have told you there's a reason why they aren't given authority to shoot guardsmen until a tour or two has mellowed them out a bit. It did strike us as a bit wasteful, though. Even if penal legionnaires were considered even more expendable than your typical guardsman, if that's even possible, one had to wonder how they were managing to keep the legion from dwindling away to nothing before it ever saw combat. That little question was answered for us just after lunch, when an Arbite convoy escorting 4 whole buses of new recruits rolled in. According to one of the trainees, the 4 buses full of new arrivals were the Arbite's weekly delivery of fresh meat. See, there were 2 types of legionnaires in the camp. Unlucky mudfeet and disgraced inquisitorial agents only made up about a quarter of the legion. The rest consisted of hardened dregs of the planet's criminal underworld. Unlike us guardsmen, who accepted our sorry lot fairly easily, the assorted gangers, assassins, heretics, and occasional outright lunatic chafed a little at their new strict military lifestyle, and apparently the more organized members harbored some downright lethal bad blood for each other. Anyway, as the buses unloaded, an entire platoon of legionnaires jumped off there. Water. Anyway, as the buses unloaded, an entire platoon of legionnaires jumped some of the new arrivals. Some of the cadets moved in with their shock sticks to settle things, and one of them got a bit too cocky and wound up yanked into the melee, which was when their seniors stepped in and we got to see our fancy discipline collars in action. All at once, every collar in a large radius started beeping, and almost everyone, including us, froze. But the melee's participants were a bit too wrapped in things and didn't stop until their collars went from beeping to an electrical buzzing and they all flopped over into the mud in a twitching heap. The old commissar strode out from the crowd, followed closely by a pair of toadies, as well as an unarmed cadet we belatedly recognized as a very stiff and unhappy-looking Amy. While a few cadets pulled their comrade out from under the pile, the old commissar fiddled with a fancy data slate like the one that was kept under our commissar's chair, and very abruptly, 3 of the legionnaires in the pile didn't have heads. Without a second glance, the man turned on his heel and walked off again, only pausing to instruct a squad to clean that up and shoot an unreadable glance at Amy when she began to lag a little behind him. The markswoman immediately sped up and didn't so much as glance in our direction. Afternoons in Camp Redemption were a little more free than the mornings. Most of the Legion got a second round of drills focused on such complex concepts as which way round to hold a lasgun, ditch digging, and how to serve as a human bomb. But, as Guardsmen, we already knew that stuff. The more senior members of the Legion were split up between various work details, which gave us a chance to get started on Sarge's little chore list. Sarge, scouting mission. Sarge's scouting mission to the evidence building involved a lot more drain cleaning and hand weeding of poisonous xenoflora than the trainee's description of light groundskeeping duty had led him to believe. The PDF trainee apologized, saying it varied a lot day to day, since they were filling in for a whole range of servitors that had been hauled off by the tech priests. When Sarge expressed interest in this, the trainees further explained that it wasn't actually just the evidence building's servitors. An entire third of the headquarters corpse bots had been pulled for inspection by a team of Machoses. Something to do with the discovery of a shipment of chaos-tainted servitor control units with inquisitorial markings on some backwater space station. Sarge decided to not ask further questions on the subject. During the periods of time when the cadet overseeing the groundskeeping detail, the same morose-looking one that filled in for the commissar during the morning, wasn't watching too closely, Sarge got a good look at the mundane evidence building's layout and outer security. Nothing really interesting jumped out at him about the building proper, but his attention was grabbed by 3 smaller buildings sharing its end of the compound. The one directly adjacent to the evidence building turned out to be a shipping and receiving depot, where the majority of the actual evidence being stored came in and out. Judging by the sweating inquisitorial stormtroopers hauling load after load after load of boxes, it was the one menial job in the complex that hadn't been handed off to the Legionnaires. The second building spotted had an industrial look to it. The trainees said it was a plasma incinerator used for general trash burning and the disposal of various evidence that the Inquisition was done with. When the cadet commissar wasn't nearby, the PDF trooper quietly informed Sarge that the Legionnaire squad currently running it were a bunch of organized locals best not to be trifled with. More importantly, they were also the primary source of contraband in the camp. The final smaller building wasn't nearly as interesting, at least according to the trainees. They said it was just a laundry processing building, serving both the camp and other headquarters staff in the area. The guys running it were rivals to the incinerator gang, but considerably less organized since 2 of their leaders had been executed that morning for stealing out of the bins. Tink and Twitch's assignment was a little less straightforward. Sit around in your barracks where no one can see what you're doing wasn't one of the available duties, so their official job was assisting our commissar in his functions, both official and bodily. Tink had protested and tried to foist the latter part of the job onto Doc, but the medic had his hands full working in the camp's medical corps, who had accepted him without so much as a check to see if he knew which end of the scalpel to hold, and immediately set him patching up the constant stream of bleeding legionaries sent over from the remedial drills. Anyway, fortunately for Tink and Twitch, a few discreet life support features built into the commissar's chair handled the ickier parts of their duty, which is why the trainees said they preferred to just leave him in it. The cadet who turned up at the barracks door pushing a pallet had the same disgruntled expression as the one supervising Sarge's patrol, but he brightened up immensely when Tink and Twitch took it from him and scurried off without asking any questions. Once the commissar, who'd attained a vague, profanity-filled semblance of consciousness just after lunch, had been placated with his morning drink, and loaded on the pallet, chair and all, he ordered his new handlers on a lovely little tour of the base. Nobody gave Twitch or Tink a second look as they pushed the man around the camp, slurring inarticulate curses at anyone he saw, and unsuccessfully commanding the few female cadet commissars to service him. In fact, nobody even gave him a first look. Both the cadets and the other commissars avoided the trio as much as possible and did their best to ignore them when they couldn't. Tink and Twitch quickly decided they liked the man. It was like having their very own profanity-spewing cloak of invisibility, which only occasionally spit on them and threw empty bottles at their head. Okay. I can feel my voice hurting. I need a second. Okay. It turns out talking for 40 minutes straight can do some unpleasant things to your voice. I'm trying to take care of myself, Kelly. Oh. I'm already hitting that smoke to full peck kind of voice. I'm taking care of myself. I have my last cup of tea here. I had a full pot, and I've been drinking a lot of tea, and I've completely demolished it. It's like a 32-ounce IKEA pot. I am glad that I never smoked. Okay, so I used to work at a grocery store, and at one point, I think I'd like just drank a milkshake or something, so it was all kind of like phlegmy and awful. I started coughing. And the customer that I'm helping looks at me and goes, "Oh, maybe you want to stop smoking." I'm like, "I don't smoke." And she just starts glaring at me until I finish. Oh, yes, I am going to need to head to the bathroom soon. Coffee and tea are both very good. They are both very good for different things. Right now I have some lovely green tea, and it's just kind of perfect for what I need right now. I used to have some fun customers at the grocery store. I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt all Guardsmen party for some grocery story time. I used to work at a grocery store. And this is Pennsylvania, so up until fairly recently, grocery stores were not allowed to sell liquor. Now, they've started getting restaurant licenses to sell liquor for takeout in their stores, and also theoretically to drink there, but like most of them removed seating due to during COVID. Some of them added seating back in recently, which I don't like. Old grocery party. I was not yet 21. I was like 19 or 20. And while legally, yes, I could handle alcohol at 18, store policy was no handling alcohol for any reason until you're 21. I closed the store almost every night. I was there from the hours of 6 o'clock to midnight, and then I drove home. It was 10:30, 11 at night. I'm ringing up a customer. It's the wine lady story, no one. I'm ringing up a customer. And all of a sudden, this little old lady comes up to the bagging area with 2 big 1.5 liter bottles of wine and slams them down onto the old plastic of the bagging area with a horrendous thud. And my first thought is like, okay, is this customer's mother? She's definitely old enough. I really hope she is. I really hope she's already paid for these and is like just waiting for her daughter to leave. I finish ringing up the customer. She takes her bags. She kind of gives the lady a little look and she walks off. Okay, these two are not related. I still have to deal with a little old lady who has 2 giant bottles of wine. Okay. I look at her and I say, ma'am, I'm very sorry. Our bar closed at 10 o'clock. I am not allowed to serve you those. You will need to take them back. You will need to take them back to the bar section. She gives me this dead-eyed stare. Like, 1,000-yard stare looking past me, not at me, and goes, oh, okay. So she picks up the 2 bottles of wine. She turns towards the door and she starts walking off. I call after her and I say, Miss, I'm sorry, you cannot take those. You have not paid for them. You cannot pay for them tonight. Please put those back. She stops. She turns back. She stares at me again. And once again she goes, oh, okay. And she keeps on going. I'm about to say something when she turns and she acts like she's going to walk all the way back around the registers and go back to the bar department. I'm like, okay, please do that. We had a big stack out display of Coca-Cola. She walks behind that, all this huge pillar of 12 packs. And I do not see her come out the other side. Look, this is a tiny old lady. She's like 5 foot tall, gray hair, looked to be late 70s at the youngest. I see her walk behind this big pillar of soda, and I do not see her come out the other side. So I stop, and I look, and I stare. I'm like, lady, are you serious? After a moment, she turns around, and I see her like something out of an old cartoon, like a fucking Looney Tunes cartoon, poking her head out slow as she can, and then darting back behind the soda. She does this 2 or 3 times while I'm staring, clearly thinking that I can't see her doing this. So finally, I've had enough, and I walk over. And I say, ma'am, I'm sorry, but if you're not going to put those back, I'm going to have to take those from you. And she hands me one of the big bottles and has a suspiciously wine bottle shaped outline underneath her hoodie. And finally, I go, Miss, I know you had 2 of those. I know you're still holding the other. Please hand it to me right now. So finally, defeated, she hands me the other bottle and walks out the door. And I go back and I put these back on the shelf. And I never saw her again. With that, I really need to go to the bathroom. I will be right back. Okay. I return. I remind you of the time you had a problem paying for... because ours peeled off the price sticker, gave the guy a tenner, and told him to ring it in the next time they can. Customer service is evil. Working in the public generally is. You do traffic control. Oh, God. Yeah. Customer service is a terrible, terrible industry. I do not recommend it to anyone. Grocery, I would honestly say, is like the worst customer service can get, because it is the worst elements of retail combined with the worst elements, not the worst, the worst elements of retail combined with some of the worst elements of what is it called? Food service. I can think. You're fishing in sand dunes in FF14. Nice. I haven't done fishing. I've refused to make Sigrid fish. My friend just responded. I sent my friend the fucking Jeep that I was looking at earlier. Oh. And my friend is having the same reaction I was of, no fucking way in hell a Jeep is, a 1990 Jeep is worth $13,500. Oh, God. Right now, I work in a liquor store, and the hilarious part is that I don't get nearly as many awful customers as I did in a grocery store. Some of that may just be the hours. I'm not there close to midnight. Um, I've had a few fun ones. I had one lady. Okay, so one of the parking lots I work at, um, our store is directly in front of one of the entrances to the parking lot, and this is a tiny little strip mall off of a semi-major road. You cannot park at that entrance. It is an intersection between like the rest of the parking lot and the entrance. And people make illegal lefts in and out of it all the fucking time at speed. Parking in that is a death sentence. At one point, this woman in this fancy white convertible pulls her car right up in the middle of that intersection along the curb. And at first, I'm looking out, I'm like, what the fuck is she doing? Looks like she's talking to whoever's in her passenger seat. I'm like, okay. Whatever she's doing, she's taking ages. If she comes in here and she gets one bottle or a pint or something, fine. Whatever. I'll send her on her way. Don't need to say anything. She comes inside and she pulls out a cart. And I look at her and I say, ma'am, I'm very sorry. You cannot park your car there. She turns around and she goes, what do you mean I can't park there? Ma'am, that's the entrance of the parking lot. It's very dangerous for you to park there. Well, there's no sign saying I can't park there. That does not matter. It's not a parking space. It's the middle of an intersection. Please move your car. My stepdaughter is in the passenger seat. It's fine. That's not fine. That just means she's in danger if the car is hit. Right. This goes back and forth for a bit. Finally, she goes back out to the car. And she could pull into one of the parking spaces that is very close to our store. She pulls across the parking lot to a parking space unnecessarily far away. She comes in, she turns to me, and she goes, I just had surgery. I'm handicapped. I can't believe you made me pull so far away. I look at her. I say, ma'am, if you're handicapped, there is a handicap parking space right around that side of the store. It is significantly closer. You would have had to drive past it to park your car there. And she splutters for words, keeps going, finally runs herself out and storms off to shop. She is in the store shopping for 30 minutes at least. 30 minutes that she would have just left her car there. And while she's shopping, I go up to my boss and I look at him and I go, hey, I know you heard what just happened. I think we both know it's for the best if I do not ring her up today. And he nods and goes, yeah, I was going to do the same thing. Or I was going to say the same thing. I'm like, yeah. So finally she comes up to the register and he's ringing her up. And he says, I heard you say you were handicapped. Would you like me to help you out to the car with these? And she starts going, oh, yes, thank you. And then stops herself and goes, actually, why don't you have the idiot do it? And he says, ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to not insult my clerk like that. And she lifts up the entire case herself, picks it up out of her cart, and storms out the door. No help. And we just look at each other like, the fuck? We didn't ban this customer. We were expecting her to call and complain. We sent an email to our district manager going like, hey, here's what happened in case she starts calling and complaining. Never heard from this woman again. The customer who called me slurs is the one who called to complain. Yeah, I'll tell that story. Okay. So, I'm at a different store. Much larger store. And it's a little later at night. I think we're like an hour until close. Slurs, yep. And I'm ringing up a couple of customers who, if I remember like my times correctly that night, were also a pair of fairly rude customers who were like expecting me to walk to use a register that I was not logged into to ring them out, which I couldn't because I didn't have a till on, so I literally cannot log into that register to ring them out. But like I finished ringing up these customers, whatever. I don't care. I got them out of my store. This other woman has been setting her bottles up on the opposite side of the register. Now this is like if you've been in a Pennsylvania state store, you know some of the larger stores have like this big register station that's 4 registers, 2 on either side, big counters, and a big bar, a big like counter in the middle separating them. You know, like Pennsylvania state stores, all owned by the state, same pattern across the state. And this woman is setting her bottles down on the opposite side, and I'm like, okay, you're not really supposed to be doing that. I'm not going to say anything. She's probably just shopping. She's probably just got more she wants to get, and she's just going to like maybe ask me for something. She comes around to my side of the register. I'm like, hi, can I help you find anything tonight? And she says, oh, my bottles are just over there. I look over and I'm like, okay. Like, were you trying to find? No, I found everything I wanted. I'm like, oh, you just want me to go grab all of your bottles. I don't want to do this. I think you're an ass for not just bringing your bottles over because you clearly were able to carry them all the way there. But I will not argue. I keep my mouth shut. I go over and I grab all of her bottles and I bring them over and I start ringing them up. And Pennsylvania has what is called chairman's selection, which are generally one-time offering wines. When they are gone, they are gone. They are very cheap. They're fairly good for the price. They go quick, and we don't get more. She goes, "Is this good?" I'm like, "It's been very popular. It's a chairman's, so if you want more, you should probably get it now." She's like, "Do you know if you'll be getting any more in?" I'm like, "I have no idea." It's like, "Oh, I might get some more. I might get another 5 bottles." I'm like, "Okay. Would you like to go grab those?" She goes, "Why can't you get them for me?" "Ma'am, I cannot do your shopping for you. I'm sorry. It's just the rules. I'm not allowed to do your shopping for you. You have to get them yourself. And she argues with me on that for not that long, but longer than you should have to argue. And she goes over. She finally kind of storms over, gets another 5 bottle, carrying 5 bottles of wine awkwardly in her arms instead of getting a cart or a basket or anything. If you needed, we have carts and baskets if you need to care, if you need help carrying stuff around. I'm sorry. She sets all of her stuff down and she looks at me with my long hair, my dyed undercut, my trans pride flag face mask, and goes, there was a time when a gentleman would help, or there was a time when a man would help a woman out. That's very nice. I'm not a man. She stares at me what? You heard me. It's like, oh, are you one of those? Proceeds to call me a slur. Does that matter? Well, no, I just want to know if you're one of them. I'm like, that does not matter. One way or another, I cannot help you. I cannot do your shopping for you. If you would like us to do your shopping for you, you can always place a curbside order and we can do your shopping and bring it out to the curb if that is so important for you. She just keeps going on and on. You are correct, Kelly. And I get all of her stuff rung up. I pack it all up for her. I can't remember if I bagged or boxed it. Doesn't matter. If you'd like some help out to the car with this, you can pull your car up to the curb, and I can bring this all out for you. And she's like, aren't there any men in the store? I'm like, what? Well, you said you're not a man, so aren't there any men in the store? It's just me and my boss Patty tonight. She's like, well, call Patty up. I'm like, okay. So I call Patty over. Not her real name, of course. And my boss has not heard a word of what's been going on. Has no idea what she's walked into. And is so confused. We're both at this point, we're both trying to, and this woman looks at my boss and goes, well, since he's not a man and he's not a woman, I don't want, what? Continues to go on this bizarre rant. Patty's like, okay, if you would like help out to your car, pull your car up, we'll bring it out for you. And she just keeps freaking out at us, at both of us, now that my boss is up here. And eventually takes all of her things and storms out of the store. And we're both staring at each other so confused. And I fill my boss in on the background. I know you are correct, Kelly. This customer just freaked the fuck out. I come in, I forget if it was the next day or a couple days later, and the store manager calls me over because, the boss I was with that night, one of the assistants running the shift that night, store manager is in the next time I'm in, and he calls me over. He goes, Z, can you tell me what happened the other night? What? Yeah, we got a call from a customer, and I tell him the exact same story, and Patty had already been in and told him this story. And I told the same story. And, and he's like, this is all exactly what she said. This is all exactly what the customer said. Like, what? This woman told the exact same story I just told you all. And somehow, without changing a word of it, thought she was in the right. And we were all so fucking confused what the hell was going on here. Apparently she is like sort of a regular. Not like regular enough that anyone knows her name or could recognize her, but like regular enough that the moment she starts acting up, everyone goes, "Oh, it's you." Great, this bullshit again. Like, she's just awful and apparently has a reputation. I never saw her again, but apparently she comes in semi-regularly. Actually, she came in after that because one of the things when she talked to the store manager, she was like insistent on coming in on a day when he was on shift and neither me nor the other manager were around. It was like she did and was like apparently assuming something would have been done about that foul employee you have. Like, no. Fuck off. Shut the fuck up. What? The hell? I've... Oh, I'm very aware. I've been working retail since I was like 16. I've learned so many things. I've learned never yell at a customer. Um never never be the reason that you can't do service. You can decline to do service to someone. Always have a backup explanation. I'm not allowed, or the system won't, the system cannot do that, or I'm sorry, I need a manager's approval, give me a moment. Always. Always stuff like that. Always level tone, just I'm very sorry about the issue. If you'll give me a minute, I can see if I can get this straightened out for you. I can ask my manager if I can override this somehow, but I really don't know if I'm going to be able to help you with that. Just always keep your voice level. And sometimes it still doesn't work. Because some people wake up in the morning and go, I'm about to make myself everyone's problem. And it's not worth getting mad at them either. Because they're going to leave. And then having yelled at them doesn't do anything to them and just means you've just yelled at someone and you're gonna like at best just kind of feel shitty for the rest of the day. Always kick the problem up to someone else if you can. If you legitimately can solve the problem, solve it as quickly as you can. If this customer is a regular, you are now their favorite. They love you. That was the best part about working self-checkout. I learned what problems everyone was having. Regulars would come up to me when I worked at the grocery store. Regulars would come up to me and go, thank you for teaching me how to use this. You've made this so much faster. And that was so nice. And it made my job easier because it meant people who were there regularly didn't need my help. And I could just sit there and watch. But, you know, like, when you can, solve problems, because it makes people like you. When you can't, or you don't have the energy, I'm sorry, I can't do anything for you. I can see if my manager is able to, but, you know, I really don't know. It may be a limitation of our systems. You know how you know how all these systems are. They're old, they're lowest bidder. You know. And if you can't convince the customer that the blame is on the system or simply on the management structure and you're really just not allowed, they're not worth arguing with. Just get them out of the store. I've worked retail for too long. There was a guy at the hotel that you worked at that acted super pretentious, like he was a platinum member, but only booked via Expedia. Beautiful. Also, I work in liquor sales. Do you have any Blantons today? No, I'm very sorry. We only get that maybe once every 2 or 3 months, so we only get one case of it. Are you sure? Can you check? I was told that you hold on to the bottles for yourselves and your friends. No. Do you want me to show you the system? Oh yeah, I hate point of sale systems, but you know. After a certain point, there is a certain amount of error that is on how those systems are set up and built, and a certain amount of error that is on the customer. So much of it can be solved if you just give people a little gentle instruction. But most stores do not barely even train their employees on that. Liquor selection is mildly limited because your government is too controlling. That sucks. I mean, that's really funny to hear. That's really funny to hear as a Pennsylvanian. I am a Pennsylvanian. And if you want to talk about state control of the liquor selection, I literally own, or like the state literally owns all liquor sales. Yeah, they did put a ban on like proper Everclear in Pennsylvania, but there is a weaker Everclear that they make specifically for Pennsylvania that's still higher proof than like it's still higher proof than 100 proof. It's still higher than 100 or so, but you know. Pennsylvania's fairly strict. I like our stores though. Distilleries everywhere. Pennsylvania does a lot to promote local breweries and local distilleries. It's just only we can sell it. Every time a POS fully initialized, the power dropped. Oh god, I can only imagine that. That, oh. Okay, I am going to continue. Where was I? Oh, so let me double check where I'm sitting at. I'm at a clean 1400. That's about what I paid for my Saturn. I miss my Saturn. I know I have been advised against purchasing a Saturn, but I still miss my SL1. No, Everclear is not. Everclear is a brand name of alcohol, and it is used to mix into punches. Like proper full Everclear got banned because some state senator's kid got drunk on it at a college party and died of alcohol poisoning, so they limited the proof of Everclear. Different than like paint stripper alcohol that you'll see at a hardware store. Different kind of Everclear. Okay. The parade wound up visiting pretty much every building in the camp, with the notable exception of the command post, which the commissar informed the pair was full of pissant busybodies unfit to choke on my massive... Well, safe to say he wasn't on the best of terms with his nominal superiors. From what Tink and Twitch could gather from the little tidbits of sense mixed in with the incoherent ranting, the man had once been a pretty successful commissarial career with some fancy noble regiment. Medals, parades, beautiful women expressing their eternal gratitude to their planet's noble saviors and all that stuff. Right up to the point where literally his entire regiment deserted. Not to the Tau Empire, Twitch checked. The man had just come back from a trip to Planetary HQ when the regiment's other commissar, and they were gone. Gear, armor, tents, camp followers, and all. Nothing left besides an excessively detailed note telling the campaign's senior brass where to stick it. Needless to say, the said brass had been pissed. The Inquisition had gotten involved, things had gotten political, and here they were, assigned permanent duty to this shithole. Not to the Legion, mind, but the camp itself. Everyone else got out eventually, one way or another, but not him, or that weasel-faced, self-righteous, kissing, ladder-climbing, lying little shit. His one solace in life was that our glorious deaths would doubtlessly be long, horrible, and probably involve orcs with pointy sticks. Twitch wholeheartedly agreed. Anyway, after a final stop at the quartermaster's for as much booze as the harried man running the stores would give him, plus a few extra bottles he commanded his minions to cram down their pants when the man's back was turned, Tink and Twitch were free to do as much collar tinkering as they could manage while the old man's increasingly slurred curses transitioned to snores. The cadet never came back for the pallet. Nubby, who'd vanished along with the ex-con trainee, returned to the barrack after everyone else that evening and brought back what looked to be homemade lockpicking tools with him. Unfortunately, he also brought 3 legionnaires, one of whom Sarge recognized from the crew working the incinerator, and there was a bit of disagreement on the matter of payment. A few bottles out of the snoring commissar's stash had originally been offered, but upon arrival, the biggest of the 3 men informed us that the interrogator had run up a tab and we'd inherited his debt. Needless to say, we saw things differently. Tink and Twitch were in favor of just killing them. We did have 3-to-1 odds, and were all armed with a selection of pokey metal things courtesy of their stop at the quartermaster's office. Doc and Nubby were feeling a bit wussier, though, especially considering the way we'd seen the old commissar break up that one fight. So, the ultimate decision was left to our fearless leader. Sarge briefly debated the merits of establishing superiority by punching the biggest thug in the snout, possibly with his augmetic hand, but judging by the trainee's worried expression, it didn't seem like the smartest fight to pick. And anyway, it was a little bit early to be burning bridges with our only supplier in the camp. After a bit of arguing and haggling from Sarge and Nubby respectively, the thugs were sent off with as much booze as the trainees felt we could slip out of the commissar's collection without him noticing. The 3 men smugly thanked us for the interest payment and said they expected more next week. We didn't need the trainees to tell us that the arrangement wasn't going to be a stable one. Our shaky relations with the local underworld were only a minor concern compared with the looming 10-day limit on them throwing all our stuff out. We weren't sure what Oak would do to us if his super-secret conspiracy foiling boxes got thrown in the incinerator, but we were pretty sure death would be a preferable alternative. So it was that So it was an incredible relief when we finally got our first real break on the 6th day. That morning, thanks to a downright heroic series of fuck-ups by the locals during the live fire drill, nearly 24 Legionnaires landed themselves in the base hospital, while another 10 skipped straight to the morgue. Doc's offer to handle the post-snafu cleanup, including the augmetic recycling, was eagerly accepted by the overworked head medicae. That afternoon, the drunk commissar's escort was larger than usual, and a bag of tools was crammed under his chair. After the mandatory first stops to empty and refill the crotchety bastard, the parade paused at the morgue, where Tink and Twitch split off while Nubby and the ex-con trainee stayed with the commissar and kept an eye out for trouble. Inside the morgue, Doc had their 7 Legionnaires who died with their collars on laid out and ready, and watched over Tink's shoulder as the techie brought out his tools and announced his intention to start by isolating the primary control board. A few seconds of fiddling later, Tink had one of the collar's panels open, exposing a jumble of wires, circuits, shaped charges, and a little boxy thing which he didn't recognize from the manual, which immediately started beeping. Tink managed to duck in time. Doc was covered with a light marinade of neck bits. While Doc swore and attempted to fish the Legionnaire's head out from under the table it had rolled under, Twitch seized the tool from Tink and reminded the techie that he'd told him so. The first step had to be disconnecting the detonators. Doc swore. Doc swore again as the second head rolled past him. 10 minutes and 4 more headless corpses later, we'd firmly established several things not to do, especially in regards to the beepy box thing. Tink was nursing a burned hand and arguing with Twitch over whether they should try wrapping the last collar in some... There. Tink was nurturing. Nurturing? Nurturing, the most noble of pastimes. Tink was nursing a burned hand and arguing with Twitch over whether they should try wrapping the last collar in some sort of scan-proof fabric they'd wrapped the tools in before they made an attempt on the final volunteer, when the corpse in question abruptly sat up and announced that he actually felt completely fine and would be returning to duty now. There was a shocked pause as everyone tried to shift mental gears, and then the man bolted for the exit. None of us had gotten more than 3 steps before the not-quite-dead Legionnaire hit the heavy metal and, thank the Emperor, locked fire exit at full sprint and bounced off with the sound like a coconut being hit with a bat. All 3 troopers breathed a sigh of relief, only to freeze as someone started knocking on the door from the other side. Fortunately, the knocker turned out to just be the ex-con trainee. Once Doc let him in, he began to ask if we'd set off any alarms, only to break off mid-sentence as he registered the unholy mess of headless corpses, the patina of gore dripping off the walls, ceiling, and all 3 troopers, and the feebly twitching Legionnaire lying in front of the door. The trainee paled and announced that we were all going to die. At Doc's prodding, he expanded, explaining that a posse consisting of the old sour-faced commissar, his entourage, and the tech priest in charge of the collars had just left the command building, and he was pretty sure they were coming this way. We had just a few minutes to somehow hide the evidence of collar tampering and get out of here, or they'd have the lot of us up on the gallows before dinner time.
Doc whimpered, Twitch swore, and Tink pulled the unconscious Legionnaire's pants off. Tink! What? What? Hey, Jim. Thank you. Okay. I've been going for a little over 2 hours. Fang of Asgard, what do you think I'm doing? Am I getting this fresh? It's been out for a couple of weeks. I just haven't had time to read. I'm actually still in what's been out for like the last 3 years. I haven't gotten to the new stuff yet. I might do some more tomorrow night. This is the new stuff, Aaron. I mean, yeah, like the new stuff. He finished Penal Legion. Shoggy keeps updates going on his Twitter. Okay. That said, I've been going for 2 hours and 20 minutes. I think I'm going to stop. I'm going to take a breather. And I might do something else for a little bit. I might start a new stream, so this is just all Guardsmen Party and other miscellaneous stories. And I might see if Kelly and possibly other folks are still up for some spell table to keep things going. Thank you everyone for joining in for some All Guardsmen Party. I will be back in give me 10 to 20 minutes. And just to be clear, this is staying up until I finish reading the All Guardsmen Party and get it all edited together so that there is a way to listen to me reading it. I'm also going to try, I don't have promises for you. I am going to try to timestamp this with YouTube's chapter thing so that there's like actually a navigable, here's AGP, here's me telling a goofy story, here's AGP, here's me getting distracted, etc. Anyway, have a good one. I'll be back in 10 to 20 minutes. Oh, my name is Zaya, or Z for short. That's what I go by these days. Anyway, I will be back later in a few minutes.